It was the middle of July, the kind of humid summer that made even the concrete seem to sweat, when I finally handed the keys to my parents with a grin stretched across my face. I had worked for months, no years, for this moment. Saving little, by little skipping vacations, turning down outings, ignoring the seductive glow of online sales. Every small sacrifice stitched itself together into a single burning hope, to give back to the two people who had given me everything. The car was a silver Honda CR-V, nothing too flashy, but polished and new, with that unmistakable scent of fresh leather and unbreathed air. It sat in the driveway like a reward, like a promise fulfilled. My mother touched the steering wheel as though it might vanish if she held it too tight. My father just stared, his lips parted slightly, blinking, as if trying to make sense of what stood before him. Neither of them had ever owned a brand new car before. I had imagined that moment 1,000 times, how they would react, the laughter, the tears, the warmth curling through all of us like a shared fire. And for a while, it was perfect. My mom hugged me so hard I could feel the gratitude trembling in her chest. My dad, ever the stoic, pulled me into a sudden embrace that lasted just long enough to tell me everything he couldn't say aloud. We took photos that evening, the sun dipping low behind us, casting soft gold across the hood. My father sat in the driver's seat, my mother beside him, both beaming like teenagers on their first road trip. I stood behind them, smiling, proud, fulfilled in a way that went beyond money or material things. It was love, transmuted into steel, wheels, and engine. For a week, they drove it everywhere, even when they didn't need to. Trips to the grocery store became little adventures. My dad started offering to give neighbors rides. My mom talked about taking the long way home just to stretch the tires a little. I soaked in their joy. It filled the empty spaces inside me, the ones that had grown during the lonely climb toward financial stability. But then, the calls stopped. At first, it was small, texts left unanswered, calls going to voicemail. I assumed they were just busy, maybe caught up in the newfound freedom the car had given them. But a few days later, when I finally got through to my mom, her voice was tight, hesitant, the way it used to be when she didn't want to tell me something. "We lent it to your cousin for a bit," she said, casual, too casual, as though she were talking about a sweater or a book. "He's had some trouble getting to work lately." The world slowed in that moment, just enough for my heartbeat to fall into a strange, dragging rhythm. I asked which cousin. She said Eric, and I almost laughed because it made no sense. Eric, the one who crashed his last car into a guardrail while trying to take a selfie. Eric, who hadn't held down a job longer than 3 months since graduating. Eric, who once borrowed my laptop and returned it, cracked down the middle with no explanation. I tried to stay calm. I asked how long he'd have it. "Just a little while," she said. "He really needs it right now. You understand, don't you?" I didn't. I didn't understand at all. I asked if he was insured to drive it. She hesitated. Then she said something about how it's all family, and he's being really careful this time. My stomach twisted. The image of that gleaming, silver SUV, the one I had bought for them, now in Eric's hands, being driven through potholes and past red lights, made my skin crawl. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun with quiet indifference. My mind raced through every dollar I had saved, every night I worked overtime, every time I chose instant noodles over takeout. I hadn't done it for Eric. I hadn't done it to lend out. I had done it for them because they mattered most. Because they had always mattered most, and yet they gave it away. They gave it away like it was nothing, like I was nothing. The next morning I called again, needing to hear something different, hoping maybe it had been a misunderstanding, or just a temporary lapse in judgment. My mother answered, her tone bright, too bright, and she launched into a story about how Eric had used the car to get to an interview, how grateful he was, how this might be the start of him getting his life together. I listened, my mouth tight, words catching in my throat like fish caught in a net. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just asked, quietly, tightly, when I'd be getting the car back. There was a pause. Then she sighed, That long, weary sigh she used to make when I disappointed her as a teenager. We were thinking, she began, already choosing her words. Maybe it makes more sense if he keeps it for a while, just until he's really on his feet. You have your own car. You're doing fine. And that was the moment. Those words, soft as feathers, sharp as razors. You're doing fine. As if being okay meant my feelings didn't matter. As if success erased the need to be seen, to be cared for in return. I could barely breathe. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. My hands trembled. I stood in my kitchen, the morning sun slanting in through the blinds, painting golden stripes across the tile, and I felt hollow. Not angry, not yet. Just stunned. Days passed. I didn't call. They didn't call. I imagined Eric behind the wheel, music blasting, his foot heavy on the gas. I imagined crumbs on the seat, fast food wrappers in the door pockets, the car's clean interior slowly disintegrating into the chaos that always followed him. I couldn't help myself. I drove by their house. The car wasn't there. The driveway looked strange without it, like a smile with a missing tooth. I saw my father through the window, sitting at the table reading. He looked peaceful. Too peaceful. I left without knocking. The next time I saw the car was 3 weeks later in the parking lot of a liquor store near the highway. It was unmistakable. Silver CRV, the same chrome detail I had added, the same dealership plate still screwed on. But it wasn't parked neatly. It was crooked, one tire halfway onto the curb. And there he was, Eric, laughing with two friends as they climbed in. A cigarette dangled from his mouth. I froze. I couldn't move. The car that I had dreamed about, that I had sacrificed for, was being treated like a hand-me-down. I watched as he revved the engine unnecessarily before peeling, out of the lot like it was a joyride. My stomach dropped. That night, I confronted my parents. I didn't yell, though I wanted to. I simply told them what I saw. I told them how I felt, that it wasn't about the car, it was about the betrayal, about giving something meaningful, and watching it be tossed around like a toy in a child's hands. My mother cried. My father looked away. Neither of them defended Eric, but neither of them promised to take the car back either. We thought we were helping, my father finally said, his voice low. You don't need us like he does. Those words broke something inside me, because I did need them. I always had. Not for money, not for things. But for love, for loyalty, for the understanding that just because I had managed to stand on my own didn't mean I stopped needing a place to lean. They had mistaken independence for invulnerability, and in doing so, they had chosen someone else's. Chaos over my quiet, unwavering care. I left that night without hugging them. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in their home, and worse, I felt replaceable. The silence between us stretched into weeks. Not cold silence, not angry silence, just the kind that echoes. The kind that fills every quiet moment with unsaid things and questions too painful to ask. I didn't call, and they didn't either. Maybe they were waiting for me to get over it, to understand their decision. Or maybe they truly didn't grasp how deeply it had cut. I began avoiding places where I might run into Eric. The very thought of seeing him, carefree and unbothered, driving around in the car that was never his to take, made something dark and sour coil in my chest. My therapist asked if I wanted to talk about it, and I laughed without humor. It's just a car, I said, the lie sharp on my tongue. But it wasn't just a car. It was every missed birthday I spent working, every second job I picked up to pay off debt, every time I'd smiled through exhaustion because I believed I was building something for us, for our family. It was the representation of every effort I had poured into being more than what I came from. It was the look on my mother's face when she first sat in the driver's seat, her hand resting gently on the gear shift like it was a crown jewel. That moment, it had meant everything, and now it meant nothing. One afternoon, a message arrived from Eric. Just a short, sloppily written apology in lowercase letters, as if even grammar had no place in sincerity. Hey man, sorry if I caused any drama. I really needed the car. Hope we're cool. Cool. I stared at that word, my hand clenched around the phone so tightly my knuckles went pale. I didn't respond. There was no response I could give that wouldn't burst from my chest in a storm of bitter, helpless fury. The following week, my aunt, Eric's mother, called me. She spoke in that sugary, sweet voice I'd come to recognize as manipulative concern. I know you're upset, sweetheart, but your cousin's really trying, you know? He's working full-time now. The car has helped so much. Then he should have bought his own, I said, sharper than I meant to. She tisked, like I was a child refusing to share my toys. You're doing so well. This car, it's nothing to you now. To him, it's everything. That phrase hit harder than I expected. Nothing to you now. That was the problem, wasn't it? They saw my success as a reason to take from me without asking. To redistribute my efforts like loose change. I began to pull back. Not just from them, from everything. I stopped going to family events, skipped birthdays, declined invitations. I made polite excuses, but the truth was simpler. I couldn't bear to sit in a room where people who were supposed to protect my gifts had treated them like they were disposable. The wedge between us widened, and still, no one gave the car back. One night, my dad called. He never called. It was always my mom who reached out. His voice was quiet, like wind trying to whisper through a closed window. He asked if I could come over. I hesitated. Then I went. The house looked the same, neatly kept, the porch light glowing, warmly in the dusk. But when the door opened, it felt like walking into the remains of something once whole. My mother tried to smile, but her eyes were rimmed red. My father gestured toward the living room, where 3 mugs sat untouched on the coffee table. We want to talk, he said. So we did. They apologized, haltingly, clumsily, but they did. They admitted they'd made a decision out of guilt, out of a misplaced need to save someone who didn't want to save himself. They said they never meant to hurt me, never meant to make me feel lesser, but they had. I thought I was doing something good, I said quietly. I just wanted you to have something that was yours. No strings, no pity, just love. My mother wiped a tear from her cheek. And we broke that. We know. My father looked at me, his face unreadable, but his voice finally cracked. You've given us so much. We failed to protect the one thing you gave us purely. I'm sorry. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears had dried up weeks ago. I asked about the car. They told me they had asked Eric to return it. He had resisted at first, but when they told him it was non-negotiable, he caved. The car was back, in the garage freshly, cleaned, quiet, and still. But I didn't ask for it back. I told them to sell it and use the money for themselves however they wanted. But I couldn't look at it anymore. I couldn't sit in it, couldn't touch the steering wheel without feeling everything it had come to represent. Betrayal, disappointment, hurt. They agreed. And when they sold it 2 weeks later, they offered me the check. I refused it. Some things cost more than dollars. In the months that followed, things between us became something else. Softer in places, more fragile in others. Like porcelain that had cracked and been glued back together. The shape remained, but the break was always there, visible if you looked closely. We spoke again, regularly, but cautiously. Conversations danced around what had happened, like a wound that had scabbed but still ached in the rain. They tried. God, they tried. My mom would send me little texts, articles she thought I'd like. My dad invited me to lunch one Saturday, and we sat across from each other at a quiet diner, the weight of unspoken things balancing on our coffee cups. I never went back to being the child who trusted them without hesitation. But I didn't shut the door completely. I couldn't. They were still my parents. They had loved me imperfectly but deeply. They had made a terrible choice, but not out of cruelty. Just confusion, misguided hope. That didn't erase the pain, but it helped me hold it without letting it harden me. Eric drifted as he always had. The job didn't last. The last I heard, he'd moved out of state. We didn't speak. I had nothing left to say to him. In some ways, I was glad. I didn't want apologies that came too late or promises he couldn't keep. What I needed wasn't words, it was space. And in that space, I started building something new. Not just boundaries, but roots. I began to save again, not for someone else this time, but for me. I moved to a quieter part of town, filled my apartment with light and plants and silence. I bought a small car, used, reliable. It wasn't meant for anyone else. It wasn't a gift, it was mine. And somehow, that mattered more. One day, about a year later, my mom came to visit. She brought a box of old family photos, sat on my couch, and we went through them together. We laughed. We cried a little. Then she pulled out a photo I hadn't seen before. It was from the day I gave them the car. There they were, standing in the driveway, my father with his arm around my mother, both of them lit by that golden summer sun. In the corner, just barely in frame, was me, holding the keys, smiling like I had everything in the world. She handed me the photo. "You gave us something more than a car," she said quietly. "You gave us pride. You made us feel seen. I'm sorry we didn't protect that better." I didn't answer. I just nodded, holding the photo in my hands like it was something fragile, something sacred. And maybe it still was. Later that evening, after she left, I placed the photo in a small, wooden frame and set it by the window. I looked at it for a long time. It didn't hurt the way it used to. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I had survived it. Because I had grown. I had loved them enough to give them something precious. And I had learned to love myself enough to walk away when that gift was mishandled. And maybe that's what family really is. Not blind devotion, not endless sacrifice, but the ability to rebuild after everything breaks. Even when the pieces don't fit quite the same. Even when the shine never fully returns. Because sometimes love is not about what we give, but what we learn to protect.